drawn to a flame. Your wings will burn in anguish. Time after time.
There's little doubt that Dark Souls 2 had a tough act to follow. The first Dark Souls is one of, if not the single best game released in the last 10 years, and any follow-up would be wise to follow closely in its footsteps. But how close is too close? And what if it doesn't quite fill the gigantic demon-sized shoes left behind by its predecessor? For what it's worth, Dark Souls 2 is an absolute blast. Anyone familiar with the series knows how these games play out. You choose your character build focused around melee, magic, or ranged classes and so on, then you strike out to explore a world filled to the brim with monsters, enemies, secrets, and gigantic bosses just lounging around waiting to kill you. Dark Souls 2 gets the core of the experience down well. The combat is fluid, tight, tense, and the risk versus reward mechanic is still very much present. Do you press forward into that dark chasm, hoping there's a bonfire ahead, risking all your souls in the process? Or play it safe and return to the last bonfire to restore your weapon durability and then go level up? These moments are frequent and comprise most of what makes Dark Souls 2 great, as it did with its predecessor. The Souls series has always prided itself in its difficulty, and the same holds true for Dark Souls 2, but the reality is combat's just more nuanced than most other games. It requires patience, skill, practice, and, quite often, a bit of luck. The combat feels weighty, with each swing that hits its mark bringing instant satisfaction, and each glancing blow off an enemy's shield feels like a defeat in its own right. The world of Drang Lake is a dangerous place that will test your abilities as both a chosen undead and a gamer, but the instant elation of overcoming a difficult boss or challenging gauntlet of enemies is still unparalleled by any other series or any other medium. There are some changes to the formula that mix things up this time around the old demon stomping grounds. Life gems are a return of the consumable healing items left behind after Demon Souls, but still used in conjunction with the Estus flask from the previous game. Actions like rolling to avoid damage and performing backstabs are more nuanced and harder to pull off, and every time you die you lose a small bit of your health bar, replenishable by using a consumable but finite item called a human effigy, this game's take on humanity. Enemies will also stop spawning if you kill them over a dozen times or so, a change I found mostly welcome in one or two areas. The ability to just bash my head against a wall for so long, knowing I'll eventually break through the other side, prevented many controllers from being tossed out my window. Every kill meant progression, and once I cleared an area, I could always use a bonfire ascetic to respawn the enemies, making them harder to beat, but yielding more souls. Most of these changes work, but many feel superfluous when added to the already very tight combat experience in the original Dark Souls. I found myself hardly ever using life gems, and the loss of health mechanic I still feel apathetic about, as there are ways to increase your permanent max health. Playing most of the game as a holo doesn't really disrupt the experience as much as you might think it does anyway. What hasn't changed, thankfully, is the unique and interesting level design, both visually and in their individual layouts. The sense of discovery when you find a hidden wall or pathway that leads to the next weapon that will turn your enemies into ground meat faster is still glorious, and the levels themselves are fun to traverse and interesting to look at. While not quite what was promised at E3, the visuals and much of the lighting design are still nothing short of stunning, at least on PC. You'll explore everywhere from mist-shrouded woods, a castle sinking into a volcano, and an old prison still warded by hollow suits of armor. Areas like the gutter even shake up the Blighttown formula by having you traverse a maze of scaffolding in the dark while a sickening, throbbing noise pulses in the background. However, that all comes with one big asterisk. Another change directly tied to level design is the ability to warp between bonfires from the beginning of the game. While certainly convenient, the game loses the sense of progression found in its predecessor. The feeling of diving deeper and deeper into a world until you found yourself utterly lost in it. Dark Souls 1 placed unlockable shortcuts that would help you traverse the world easier as you progressed, something that gave Lordran a feeling that all the pieces served a greater whole and were part of the same world that you were unearthing. This is sorely missing in Dark Souls 2. The game goes for a level-by-level approach, which is definitely interesting and fun to explore, but is vastly inferior to the interconnected but still varied world of Dark Souls 1. Areas are stitched together without any real thought as to how they would be connected logically, and many paths ended in dead ends that made you warp back to your hometown of Majula. This level-based design draws attention to the fact that Dark Souls 2 is a game, rather than sucking you into a world that, as beautiful and dangerous as it is, you never wanted to leave. Also lacking are the memorable boss fights the series is usually known for. Some are even retreads of old bosses, but without any real context. This makes them feel out of place. Many are roughly the same size, wield big swords, and are aggressive. The occasional large monster will challenge your ability to fight a boss alongside smaller, weaker enemies, but this feels like a gimmick made to compromise for what exactly? The lack of difficulty in the bosses? It just adds a layer of tediousness that isn't needed. This isn't helped by the sometimes questionable hitboxes that made some deaths seem cheap or unfair, a path that, if not carefully tread, could mean death for a series that prides itself on testing players' skill with fairness. This isn't to say all bosses are bad. The encounter with the 3 Ruined Sentinels in the Lost Bastille and the Looking Glass Knight in Drang Lake Castle were fun and tense, but the truth is, the majority of the bosses were repetitive, dull, and often not very interesting to even look at. Even the optional bosses were a drag. They were long, tedious, and had a very unfair moveset. Compare this to Artorias, Manus, and the Black Dragon Calamite in Dark Souls 1. They were all challenging and long fights, but they were always fair and a blast to play. These problems build up to an even greater one I had with Dark Souls 2, the lack of comprehensive lore and story. The Souls series has always been light on these aspects, allowing players to piece together bits of information to form an ambiguous narrative. However, these bits of information always fit properly and tied the game together with a unifying theme. Both Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls before it grasped the themes of hope and despair, but explored them very differently, in true spiritual successor form. Your goal in Dark Souls 2 is never clear. The game starts along a parallel concept of despair by having NPCs go on about forgetting how they ended up in Drang Lake. But by the second half of the game, the thematic elements were so muddled and vague that the final cutscene had as much emotional weight behind it as a paperclip, effectively clipping the game together, yes, but without any strength or resonance. This lack of concrete lore isn't helped by the sporadic and stitched-together level design that doesn't give the world any cohesiveness, especially towards the latter half of the game. Yes, the designs are gorgeous and fun to explore, but they don't particularly mean anything. This is a larger problem than it initially seems. While it might not seem fair to compare Dark Souls 2 to its older and more mature sibling, the truth is you don't know what a big role the lore plays in a Souls game until it's not there. The exploration certainly loses a bit of its fun when it feels like there isn't a solid, believable world backing it all up. When the credits rolled in the original game, I felt like a great weight had been lifted off my shoulders, a sense of relief and elation that slowly eased me out of the world that it had so effectively drawn me into. When the credits rolled in Dark Souls 2, I felt more like I had just completed a large stack of paperwork, glad that it was done, but left without any real lasting sense of fulfillment or completion. This lack of comprehensive world prevented the game from being something truly special, instead of just very good. The difference on paper is almost negligible. After all, the core gameplay is still intact. But From Software has now given us a clear line between what makes a great video game and what makes a great work of art that transcends the medium. So what does it mean to go beyond death? It means you get some more of the same great combat and exploration as the previous games, just without the weighted themes that made the series resonate with people on a higher level. The world of Drang Lake is a fun playground to explore and still filled with lots of lore to uncover, but just expect it to fall short of the heights established by its predecessor. Dark Souls 2 is still a lot of fun to play and jam-packed with content, so if you like what you see, it's absolutely worth the price of admission. My first run-through clocked in at around 50 hours, and I enjoyed almost every minute of it. Despite lacking the grander trappings of its predecessor, any fan of the Souls series should check it out. For more reviews and discussion on video games, movies, music, and more, keep checking out Review Anything.